Britain is about to get its seventh prime minister in a decade, and that fact alone tells you something about the political weather we've been living through. This time, it's Andy Burnham, freshly elected as leader of the Labour Party, and set to walk into Downing Street on Monday. Burnham isn't new to national politics, but he arrives with a reputation built outside Westminster too, as the former mayor of Greater Manchester, often branded the King of the North. The timing is no accident, and the stakes are high. Labour isn't just trying to govern. It's trying to hold ground against the growing pull of Nigel Farage's Reform UK, which has been polling strongly and pushing the political conversation in uncomfortable directions for both major parties. In his address to Labour members after an unopposed leadership win, Burnham pitched himself as a leader for places that feel overlooked. The heart of his message was simple. Politics has left some communities waiting, and he wants Labour to make them feel seen and valued again. If you've heard politicians talk about left-behind towns and regions, Burnham is leaning into that, but trying to give it a practical shape. His big promise is a dramatic shift of power away from Whitehall. Burnham says Britain needs the biggest modern rebalancing of decision-making, less control from central government, more authority for regional leaders and local areas. The argument is that if decisions are made closer to people affected by them, services improve, trust returns, and the country feels less divided. It's a familiar idea. Devolution has been debated for years, but Burnham is framing it as the central mission of his premiership. And here's where the Reform UK pressure shows up. Burnham insisted Labour shouldn't chase reform by imitating it. His line, essentially, is that you don't beat a rival party by becoming a weaker version of them. You win by sounding like yourself, acting like yourself, and offering your own answers. In other words, Labour won't try to out-reform reform, and it won't compete to be someone else. The pitch is authenticity, backed by delivery. Burnham also took care to praise the outgoing Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. That matters, because leadership changes can easily look like a rejection of what came before. Burnham is signaling continuity in tone, but also urgency in action. He's telling supporters that the change he's talking about won't be a long, slow plan that starts sometime later. He's saying the government he leads will begin laying out the path immediately, starting next week. Reaction from the trade union world has been warm. The TUC's General Secretary, Paul Nowak, welcomed the message and made a clear demand. The new government needs to raise living standards for working people, and it needs to do it quickly. That's a reminder that for Labour's core supporters, the test isn't rhetoric about national renewal. It's whether wages, bills, housing, and day-to-day security actually improve. But the pushback arrived fast, too, and it's coming from two different directions. First, Nigel Farage dismissed Burnham's speech as empty, arguing that Burnham doesn't have a real mandate because he's becoming prime minister via an internal party leadership process, not through a general election. That critique is designed to frame Burnham as an insider appointment rather than a leader chosen by the whole country. And with trust in politics already fragile, you can see why that line of attack might resonate with some voters. Second, there's criticism from parts of the press that goes beyond personality and goes straight at policy. One prominent argument, notably in the Telegraph, is that Burnham's comfort with greater public ownership and a stronger role for the state risks dragging Britain back toward the economic pain of the 1970s. That period is often remembered for industrial unrest, frequent strikes, high inflation, and a sense that the country struggled to function smoothly. The same critique draws a sharp contrast with the later Thatcher-era reforms and the decades that followed, pointing to falling strike levels, lower inflation, and rising employment as evidence that privatization and reduced union power produced more stability. The warning is clear. If you expand union influence and increase public ownership, you could invite more industrial conflict and put extra costs on the taxpayers. Burnham flatly rejects that reading of history and of what Britain needs now. His counter-argument is that 40 years of privatization, combined with a heavy central grip from Westminster, has hollowed out many regions and left too many communities without the investment or control they need. In his view, rebuilding trust requires bringing power closer to people, and in key areas like energy, transport, and water, restoring stronger public control so essential services work for the public rather than mainly for private shareholders. So what we're really watching is a familiar British political divide, but with a new face at the center of it. Supporters see Burnham as someone who can reconnect labor to communities that feel ignored and stop the drift toward Reform UK by offering competence and belonging. Critics see him as a risk, someone whose instincts on ownership, unions, and state involvement could reopen arguments they thought were settled decades ago. And that brings us to the main point. Burnham's premiership won't be judged on the elegance of his speeches or the neatness of his slogans. It will be judged on outcomes. Can he deliver visible improvements in living standards? Can he make devolution feel real rather than theoretical? Can he manage the economy without triggering the fears his opponents are already broadcasting? And, crucially, can Labour halt Reform UK's rise without losing its identity in the process? With the next general election on the horizon, Burnham's window to prove himself may be shorter than it looks. Promises are easy to announce on day one. The harder question, starting next week as he put it, is whether he can turn those promises into changes people can actually feel.